about that?
I don't know if I would say he is wrong. I mean, certainly in his mind, he feels like he said he was going to do all of these things and he's doing all of them. And there are actually some of the things that he proposed doing that I think everybody would agree are could be very good things. You know, certainly we're all cognizant of the fact that we had an issue at our border and that needs to be cleaned up. I would agree. I think, though, we can't leave it just at cleaning up the border and deporting people who may or may not be criminals. I think it needs to go further than that to deal with the entire immigration issue and come up with finally a comprehensive immigration reform package that works for our states. Every state I know is facing workforce shortages. And by deporting potential workers, we are not working towards resolution of that. We really need the administration and Congress to sit down and finally come up with a real solution that would resolve the border issue, but also resolve our workforce issue.
Governor Kelly, we're lucky to talk to a lot of elected officials on this program, but it's always different when you speak to an executive. Governors and mayors simply have a different reality than a lot of elected officials here in Washington who play the partisan game and do a lot of talking. You have to deal with things like balancing budgets, making sure services are delivered, making sure roads are paved, actual things that impact constituents' lives. And so I'm curious what your pragmatic view is of this waiting period, this sort of limbo that we're in right now, and how much time President Trump actually has to set the record straight and deliver a clear message on tariffs. You're talking to voters every day about this. Is that window about to close?
Well, I think we're past time. I think the first 100 days of this administration has just sown chaos and uncertainty all across the country. And all across issues and industries. The tariff issue is obviously the one that's most prominent and clearly creating issues for our economies in our states. In my state alone, we have worked so hard over the last 6 years and been very successful in growing our economy, in bringing in new and different industries into our state, creating 75,000 jobs, bringing in $22 billion worth of new capital investment, which is huge for a state like Kansas. All of what we've been doing is getting put up in the air as the companies that we have recruited, the companies that are here, are dealing with all of this chaos and uncertainty on the tariff issue, and they don't know where to go or what will work as they move forward. So everybody's getting to a standstill kind of position, which is not good for the companies, and it's certainly not good for our states. So, while I recognize that every new administration has the right and responsibility to, put into place policies and procedures that they think are necessary to move the country in a way that they think appropriate, but doing it in this way where it's just willy-nilly, one thing one day, another thing the next day, isn't helpful. Not to move their agenda forward, but certainly not to help our states stay on a path.
Well, and your state specifically, Governor, has more than 50,000 farms, and I wonder what you're hearing from farmers specifically about the impact of tariffs on them and whether they're going to need to count on subsidies from either the state government or the federal government to offset the impact.
Well, we have two major industries here in the state of Kansas. Aviation is one of them, and as has been in the paper, there are lots of issues going on with the aviation industry as a result of these tariffs and these sort of international battles that are going on right now. But certainly in agriculture here in Kansas, but then across the country, the tariffs create absolute havoc and real concern for our farmers. I was the very first, maybe the only Democratic governor who signed on to the USMCA, the trade deal that the Trump administration put together in his first administration, dealing with our relationship with Canada, Mexico, and the United States. I signed on to that because I thought it was in the best interest of Kansas, and now that's all being thrown out. And nothing's really replacing it. But what has happened is that our relationship, particularly with our two biggest trade partners, Canada and Mexico, are in a shambles. Our farmers very much depend upon the potash that they get from Canada to fertilize their fields. A lot of our produce and stuff, which we can't grow here, is brought in from Mexico. Our exports, for instance, when the USAID was sort of shut down, moments after he took office, we had, I don't know how many millions of pounds of milo that was sitting in silos here in the state of Kansas. Their only customer was the USDA. They were growing this specifically for them to use. So my farmers are stuck with this stuff, and the market has been completely shut down. So there are a lot of problems, and we absolutely have got to come to some resolution very quickly. And they don't want, a handout. They got that the first time around. Remember that tariffs were put in place in the first Trump administration, and they did backfill that with cash. The farmers don't want that. That's a Band-Aid that doesn't do anything for them going forward. And I think their biggest fear with what's going on right now is that, not only are they not able to sell their product right now or export their products right, but that they will ultimately lose their markets. That countries aren't going to wait forever. They're going to go find somebody else who can supply what Kansas farmers have been supplying. So it is a huge concern, and one that I hope this administration will wake up to and finally deal with, because
Governor Kelly, we only have 1 minute left. I want to give you an opportunity to pre-butt what we're going to hear this evening. Donald Trump carried your state by more than 16 points in 2024. What's your message to voters on this 100th day of the Trump administration?
Well, there's not a lot to say to voters right now. We don't have an election. Midterms aren't until 26. Another presidential election is not till 28. But I would say to all citizens that they need to make a lot of noise about how this is really impacting them and their lives. And they need to make that noise so that their congressional representatives hear them. Because what's happening right now is impacting people all across this country, whether they're talking about what they're thinking about doing with Medicaid, what's happening with tariffs, and what's happening in our higher education system. Lots and lots. They need to get loud.